In the next 200 days are some of the most perilous times for the American Republic in its history. Because if we don't get this sorted, we're going to be drawn in totally into a conflict as a combatant, as not a supplier of logistics, or as an actual combatant, a participant.
So recently, Steve Bannon sat down with Tucker Carlson on a podcast to talk about why he thinks it's such a bad idea for the U.S. to get drawn into this war between Israel and Iran, and also why he thinks it could mean the end of MAGA itself. And I thought this was especially interesting considering he was one of the chief architects of MAGA. He was essentially Trump's chief political strategist. So let's watch, let's react. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Donald J. Trump gets elected in November on the back of this amazing coalition, unprecedented coalition, different parts of American society. You never thought of anything in common. Trump paints a picture that makes it really obvious that the old structure, left versus right, Democrat versus Republican, is basically BS and a control device, I think. This is my interpretation anyway. So he creates this brand new coalition. New York Times writes almost nothing about it because it's such a massive threat. But this coalition, which you described earlier and more precisely than anybody by far, is the defining fact of American politics. And it kind of feels like it's being blown up over this war in Iran. That's my observation.
Yeah.
Correct me.
Well, I think if you look at the three planks, stop the forever wars, seal the border and deport the illegal alien, invaders, and redo the commercial relationships in the world around trade deals and bring high value added manufacturing jobs back here. They're trying to shut all three down, right? But the one that they're obsessed with the most, which I find strange, is the forever wars. They've got to be in the forever wars, and particularly in the Middle East. I mean, this is what, and I'm a big supporter of Israel.
Yes.
And I'm telling people, hey, if we get sucked into this war, which inexorably looks like it's going to happen on the combat side, it's going to not just blow up the coalition, it's also going to thwart what we're doing with the most important thing, which is the deportation of the illegal alien invaders that are here. If we don't do that, we don't have a country. And
so yeah, it's hard to disagree with what he's saying regarding the threat to Trump's coalition for sure. I don't agree with Bannon on quite a few things, especially regarding trade, but he is accurate here. This is causing a schism that we haven't seen yet. The forever wars was one of the planks in Trump's platform that he talked often about avoiding war with Iran. Yes, he did say at times Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, etc., but Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon. His DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, who he expended immense political capital to get through the Senate confirmation, also confirmed that. And there's no evidence that they've restarted their program. So Steve Bannon's right. And the ironic thing here is, though he said, I'm a supporter of Israel, people will call him anti-Semitic for opposing this war in Iran on behalf of Israel that the U.S. has already gotten sucked into.
You just see right now, they're doubling, tripling out. This is actually potentially a real civil war in our biggest cities. And President Trump has to have our backing. And this came out of nowhere. I mean, the trade deals you saw, he put together Liberation Day, but they've been thinking about it a long time. I mean, Trump's been talking about this since Lou Dobbs back in the 90s. He lays that out there. It's very sophisticated. He's got Scott Bessent running around with Lutnick. They're trying to make these deals. He sealed the border already in the first 60 days. Now we're really going down and actually having the deportation. See the fight?
As far as that goes, he hasn't really sealed the border per se. The actual immigration policy hasn't changed much in the U.S. There is indications that there's less immigration since Trump took office, but that seems to be more of a product of optics, that people don't want to risk their lives to cross the border under Trump because they believe that he means business on that more. The deportations, many of them that have happened so far, are just critics of Israel, and that's the only reason for them. The Mahmoud Khalil escapades that we've seen play out is just based on his critiques of Israel, and several others that, not including Mahmoud Khalil, but another group got sent to essentially the worst prisons in Honduras because they were critics of Israel and they happen to be here. It's not because of their immigration status. That's just like the excuse to do away with critics of Israel that happen to be here, some of which, had no other transgressions in terms of their immigration.
And then out of nowhere comes a war with Persia. It's like a shooting war with Persia, a massive shooting war with Persia. It's like, how did this happen? And that's why I've been up as a defender of Israel and someone that's very pro-Israel. I've been saying, hey, this is going to be the end of Israel because of the way these decisions have been made. And you have, I think, shockingly today, early when we had you on the show, you bring up a point that we have to address, which I think is the thing itself. What is it about this apparatus? When you have a coalition that's like 1932 that's coming together, like Roosevelt had Harvard professors and crackers and Democrats and ranchers out west and big city bosses and the Irish and the Italians, and he put it all together and they juggled it. And
you got Brooklyn, Butte, Montana, Birmingham, Alabama, and they're all on the same side. Like, how did that happen?
And they govern literally almost all the way to Trump. You know, Reagan took out part of it, Newt Gingrich took out part of it, but it was 50, 60, 70 years. We have the same ability. We have hardscrabble Hispanics on the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas. We have tech bros. We have, economic nationalists. We have economic populists. We have people that want to stop their forever wars. There's three planks. And right at the beginning of it, and it's on the 10th anniversary of coming down the Golden Escalator. That was 10 years ago Sunday. And I tell people, as many triumphs and tragedies, victories and defeats, good days and horrible days, when we're winning and sometimes we're losing, those 10 years of everything that's gone on is just the preamble for where we are today on the convergence of these crises. And now, all of a sudden, a shooting war where they're taking the Nimitz battle group out of the South China Sea and sending 3 carrier battle groups now to the North Arabian Sea, Red Sea, plus Arleigh Burke destroyers and a whole fleet in the Eastern Mediterranean. We're prepping for a major shooting war. And
yeah, it's hard to deny, and this is a scary prospect because Iran does have the technology to touch U.S. military bases there, the naval fleet that's in Bahrain, off the coast of Bahrain. About 40,000 U.S. troops are in that region, maybe even slightly more if you count contractors, around the Arabian Peninsula just off the coast of Iran, very close within touching distance. So I don't think Iran is going to attack U.S. forces unless the U.S. attacks first, but that is the cost the U.S. is going to have to pay, and that's just the immediate cost. This could be a long-term, protracted war. And he's right. This could spell the end of Israel if Israel doesn't get what it wants, and that means full U.S. involvement in this war, because they don't really have the capacity to enact regime change themselves. There's been proven to be defects in the Iron Dome. Iran has already gotten some missiles through. And unless the U.S. jumps on board with this, I don't think that this can end soon in terms of a regime change operation. And that is what Netanyahu wants. He's always wanted it. He's always talked about it. He's, drummed the war propaganda about the non-existent Iranian nuclear weapon threat forever.
How did it happen? I think what's most shocking is what you said. Hey, it was like Iraq. You're inexorably just drawn, and decisions kind of just happen. It's like, what's happened over the last 72 hours? How did we even get to this point? How did this actually happen? Who made these decisions when we had the intel out there that this was not like a thing? This was something that was going to happen a year or two from now.
Yes.
Bibi admitted to Brett Baier on Sunday night. And so the question before us is not simply the Israel-Persia situation, is what the fuck is going on in this city that just drives this city, whether you're Barack Obama or Donald Trump. And if we don't sort it out now, and I mean right now, that's what we have to have a throwdown.
Yeah, man, I've never agreed with Bannon more, I don't think. This is incredible. He's right. This city is swept up in war fever no matter who is the presidential occupant. It's why we say, the CIA and the deep state is such a threat, because they're the ones that create the war propaganda necessary for selling these wars. The Israel lobby, AIPAC always lobbies U.S. congressmen to support this junk, from Syria to Libya to Iraq. That's always happened. The military-industrial complex, the bomb makers, Boeing and Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman, and all those merchants of death that create bombs to kill people, which, by the way, wouldn't probably exist in a free market where you have to actually satisfy customers. They are profiting too, and they're pushing the politicians in this direction, no matter what the rhetoric is, no matter what the illusions are of left versus right, and, the dichotomy between Republicans and Democrats. We still seem to get war. As my good friend Tom Woods says, no matter who you vote for, you always get John McCain.
We have to name names. We have to expose it. If we don't throw it out now, throw down now in the summer of 2025, we're not going to have a country. Forget the midterms, forget the next election.
agree.
Still, we have to have this. What the CIA is, what happened in Ukraine, what the CIA has done, what DNI is doing, what the Justice Department, what the FBI, what DIA and the Pentagon. Because right now we only have a tenuous grip on those. We have 2 people at the FBI, Cash and Bongino. We got a handful of people over at the Justice.
Yeah, Cash and Bongino aren't exactly doing anything to release the Epstein files, though, and the Epstein information that we were promised. In fact, both of them seem to be at odds over some of the most basic facts of that, including whether hundreds of hours or thousands of hours of tapes exist that show Epstein's crimes, which Bondi said, Patel denies. Patel all of a sudden, conjured the idea that they actually have cell footage of Epstein. We were told that that didn't really exist, at least in the time in question he was supposed to have killed himself, and that he said, you're going to see it, but then implied that it wasn't going to be the actual act of, killing himself, but it's going to prove nothing because it's going to be him in his cell at a time where he didn't do that. So they're at odds with, at even the most basic level. They haven't persecuted or prosecuted any of the COVID criminals, the lockdowners, the people that stole our lives and brought essentially martial law to the country. They, perverted the Constitution, enacted religious worship restrictions, enacted curfews, 6-foot measure rules, just insanity. So I don't have the faith that he has in the Justice Department and the FBI, that's for sure.
Department. In a massive 30-some person or 15,000, 20,000 person operation. We have 3 or 4 people at DNI with 17 agencies. We're putting a couple of people in there. At the Pentagon, we got Pete and a handful of guys. And every time a guy steps up or the team.
Yeah, and Pete Hegseth urged the president to bomb Yemen. He campaigned for that, and he even concocted a propaganda strategy to sell it. He said to tell Trump, well, it's anti-Iran, so sell it as that. So, just garbage.
Steps up to say they want to stop the forever wars. They're turfed out. He's lost 10 people since we've even got there. And every time Bridge Colby tries to do something, Bridge Colby's on the front page of that he's an appeaser. So my point is that now we're getting down to it. With all these converging crises, we have an apparatus that reports to Wall Street, to foreign investors, to Silicon Valley, in business with the Chinese Communist Party, that's running the deal. And now's the time if we don't lance the bull over this country, you're not going to, if you can't turn around with Trump, the Trump team he has, people like you, myself, and they're blessed to have these apparatuses. If we can't do this now, it's not going to get done. And so that's why, to me, it's gone of everything we're doing, stopping the forever wars, redoing the commercial relationships with China to bring jobs back, and sealing the border and sending home deporting 10 million, which is going to be massive, almost like a civil war in these big cities. Of all of those, and I've always said the deportation is the most, to get our sovereignty back, the war we have to have now, the throwdown we have to have now is with the deep state. And
ending the wars is the biggest. It is the biggest impediment to having actual national sovereignty, because we get embroiled in these entangling alliances. The chief ones right now are Ukraine and Israel, and Israel's been the longest lasting one. So I'm with him on that. I wouldn't speak so highly of some of the figures in the administration as he does. Some of them are, at least to some degree, complicit in this war regime and this war propaganda and what's being used to sell the war, including Trump himself, saying, I don't care what Tulsi Gabbard says. I think Iran's close to acquiring a nuclear weapon. But still, support Israel in bombing residential areas in Tehran that don't have nuclear facilities in the first place. Doesn't make much sense. I'm mostly with Bannon here, though. This is a serious issue, and it's going to fracture Trump's coalition.
We can't. I think we've looked away too often. We just kind of kicking the can down the road, and if we can't do it now with Trump, it's not going to get done.
It does feel like Fox News is playing, and I never criticize Fox because they were so kind to me, but they are playing a central role in the propaganda operation here.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like 2003 again in that regard, when they played the central role in terms of cable news selling the war in Iraq. And some of the schemes they're using are the exact same. It's the same playbook. And so many people are still duped by it. It's just weapons of mass destruction rebranded. And it's all phony. It's all false. When even the CIA is saying it's false, you know it's false. It's crazy.
It's what. Let's go back to the Iraq War. I mean, you were there, you saw it. Look at the Iraq War.
I promoted the Iraq
When
War.
knowing, because of the information you were giving, knowingly what they did. If you go back and look at Iraq, it's not like these things are successful. They're not successful. They're unsuccessful. They can't be successful because, as Lincoln told us, what you need is popular opinion to have your back. And we don't do enough about educating the American people on what reality is. In fact, they give them the exact opposite. That's why it's all. That's what this is. The rise of Trump is from two things. The rise of Trump is from the failed Iraq War and from the 2008 financial collapse.
Exactly.
You had Buchanan before that. We had Perot before that. We had even Reagan for some populism, nationalism. You had these sprouts. You could see people were trying to get there, but they couldn't.
Yeah, I think I agree with him on this. Trump's rise is by and large due to the failure of forever wars, especially Iraq, which, was running all the way through his first campaign. And you had people like Jeb Bush still defending it at that time. And Trump really made a statement by saying that this was a horrible mistake. It was a disaster. That Saddam didn't have weapons of mass destruction. He said that on the debate stage. And it was a big moment. He's also right about the fact that working people, American workers that might be populist, didn't exactly like bailing out the biggest companies in the world during the financial collapse. That was, money seized from the taxpayers for some of the biggest corporate welfare, schemes that had ever been implemented, the TARP bailout. So I think he's right about that. Regardless of what you think about Trump, that does explain some of his rise, or much of it.
It was those two cataclysmic events, right? An epic failed war, right? That we were lied to about everything, the reason we went in. Because remember, at first, the American people supported it, given the information they were given. Then later, they realized that, hey, not just was the initial predicate for this a lie, all the updates were kind of a lie, right? All the updates were a lie. We really weren't winning, right? Until we sent.
And goalpost shifting, it went from, weapons of mass destruction to, all right, he doesn't have weapons of mass destruction, but it's a humanitarian catastrophe. And from it's a humanitarian catastrophe to, having Saddam in the region will destabilize it. There were so many multiple shifts in this regard, and he's exactly right. I hate to say that I supported this nonsense in 2003, by the way. I was a young 20-year-old, and thankfully I'm no longer in that headspace, but I had to repent of that, and I'm, a former neocon, if you can believe that.
General Kelly to the Anbar province to be the toughest tribe. It took forever. And 8,000 dead, 50,000 wounded, $9 trillion, $2 trillion or $7 trillion in Iraq, and $2 trillion in Afghanistan. You're just lied about the entire time. That's what's happening here. We're not being dealt with straight. And I'm just saying that on the information that's put out, the Israeli position on this has changed 3 or 4 times. First, it was the nuclear bomb, the processing of everything. There was going to be something like last weekend. You had to go now. You had to go on Thursday night. It had to happen, right? Then we find out it's a year away at earliest. And then it's a decapitation strike. They're trying to have regime change. That just kind of came up over the weekend. And
I don't agree with him on that. Regime change didn't come up over the weekend. Regime change has been a long-laid plan, not only by Netanyahu, he's talked about it openly many times throughout the past, but also the U.S. did. The U.S. planned regime change in Iran going back to at least 1996. We know this because the head of NATO, the supreme NATO commander, Wesley Clark, walked into the Pentagon and saw plans for it in 2001. He revealed this in, I believe, 2003 during his candidacy, and it was 7th on a list of 7 countries that the U.S. wanted to overthrow. Guess how many have been overthrown? And I think all of them, if not for maybe one, was done under the direction of the U.S., or at least the U.S. played a central role in it. So the U.S. has planned this a long time. It didn't just come out over the weekend. But he is right. I do think that Israel struck at that exact moment to, sabotage and to take away any possibility that the Iranian negotiations would work well. Now, I think Trump played a role in that too. The administration clearly switched their strategy from one that seemed, potentially viable and that the Iranians might accept to one that is a total non-starter. You can't just say they can't enrich uranium, otherwise that entire economy is shut down because it means no nuclear power whatsoever or medicinal usage of that enriching uranium provides.
Saying, oh, well, since they're there, we're there, we have to do it. Understand, they said this is unilateral, we're doing our own, but understanding that they needed American air assets on the defense to protect themselves. And this is
That's
why
true.
the Arleigh Burke were rushed in, and this is why American air defense assets have been used nonstop. Now they're talking about, oh, by the way, we really can't take out Fedora. We can't take out the hidden mountainous second part of this. We need American combat sorties. We need American tankers to refuel us. We need the bunker busting bombs, and we need assets. This thing changes all the time. When Tulsi Gabbard's still out there as the last thing publicly said by a senior intelligence official, she said it in March. They don't have a program. They haven't had a program. And Bret Baier asked, that's what Bret Baier asked Bibi on Sunday night. And Bibi said, well, we have new information, new intelligence. Well, hold it. We were told that we gave you exquisite intelligence. You weren't giving us intelligence.
Exactly.
We have to have a total vetting. And by the way, we need to get a vetting on Ukraine. We need to get a vetting on, was American intelligence involved? Because it's a zero probability that without our satellites, without targeting information, without fire control information, there's no chance that the Ukrainians, as courageous as they are, as much valor as they have, could have pulled out something so complicated. And so this is right now the fight. The fight has to be, we have to take on the deep state, we have to name names, and we have to basically take these organizations and take them apart. And then you're going to unmask everybody in DC that's not really on your side.
Yeah, man, I'm so with him. I've never agreed with Bannon more. Dismantling the deep state is what Americans want. We don't want reform of the FBI. We don't want a better guy in charge of the FBI, which is what a lot of Trump fans thought about Cash. We want it dismantled, abolished. We're abolitionists. We don't want this criminal regime being run by unelected bureaucrats, and that's what we've had so much of, especially since Kennedy. So, you know, I'm with him 100%. He's right about that Ukraine drone strike, by the way, that supposedly took 18 months worth of planning, and no one in the U.S. had any idea that that was happening, despite the fact it's the U.S. that provides intelligence to Ukraine. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So I'm with Bannon 100% on this point.
Going to unmask all those people that say they're conservative and say they're Republicans. When they start protecting this, you're going to say, well, hang on for a second. This doesn't mean we're a constitutional republic. Trump's commander-in-chief, this is what a constitutional republic's about. I don't care if AOC is the president later on, or Bernie Sanders, or J.D. Vance, another right-winger. Right now, we have a system that's like the Praetorian Guard. It's got its own national security policy.
Yeah.
It's got its own reason for existence. And it doesn't care whether it's progressive like Barack Obama or a economic populist nationalist like Donald Trump.
This is so true. I love that he's making this point. It's despite the fact that there's electoral changes, some of which are considered seismic, like Trump was or Obama was, you still end up getting the same foreign policy because it's these bureaucrats running things. Arthur Schlesinger warned JFK about that all the way back in 62 or 63, shortly before JFK was killed after he removed Allen Dulles as the head of the CIA. Dulles arranged the Bay of Pigs. It was an absolute disaster, and it was duplicitous. It wasn't what the American people wanted. It wasn't who they elected, and there was, sincere apprehension that the CIA was growing into a monster that acted on its own. It created its own policy. Bannon's pointing that out, and it's so accurate.
So that is the fight we have to take on.
There's this mad scramble in Washington on the right to invoke Trump's name and to make the case that, no, I represent Trump. He's on my side. I'm true MAGA. And you wind up with these.
They say that because he's supporting this war. Some of those people have only started doing that once he supported this war, by the way. They're like, I'm Team Trump. I'm with Trump. And you're not a real MAGA person if you don't support Trump in this, even though this is Trump kind of perverting a lot of his rhetoric, his non-interventionist rhetoric. I'm not going to start new wars in the Middle East. Trump fans, that was one of their leading lines boasting about Trump, and why you should vote for him was that he didn't get us into a new war.
Kind of hallucinogenic scenes where you have people who hated Trump, who were never Trump. Mark Levin, hates Trump, which is fine. But he's like the standard bearer for Trump.
Right.
But what makes it even more perverse is that these same people are allied with a deep state that is subverting Trump's stated agenda, which is negotiation toward peace, both in Ukraine
Absolutely.
And in the Middle East, Trump has said, we want to get to an agreement with a lasting peace so we can all be richer, safer, and happier. And in both places, his so-called allies who secretly hate him have destroyed that.
And most of those guys, are almost all of them to a person, were for the Ukraine war.
Yeah, another one, Shapiro. Shapiro used to be a prominent never-Trumper, didn't like the fact that Trump actually seemed to at least posture as a non-interventionist in foreign policy. Ben Shapiro is one of the most ardent neocons that supports all the wars, and now all of a sudden he's like, I'm Team Trump, and you're fake MAGA if you don't support this war now, because I'm Team Trump. Like, you can see what's happening here. This is a scheme, propaganda scheme, to make it Trump move in the direction of war, keep him there, and create this schism with the non-interventionists that happen to be part of that coalition. You can see this playing out. It's very clear. I'm so glad Tucker's pointing it out.
People in your audience should understand one principal thing. We are farther down the pike in a kinetic part of a third world war than how World War II started. If you go back from September 1939, the invasion, the start of the European War, not the Asian, but if you start with the invasion of Poland by the Germans, and you go to June of 1941, the invasion of Russia by the Wehrmacht, and you look at that time, which really they called the phony war. You look at the casualties from the Battle of Britain, the Blitz, the fall of France. You look at what happened in North Africa early on, Finland, throwing 300,000 Finland. You add it all up, it's not half of what's happened between Ukraine and Gaza today, and now in Persia. We are much bloodier. This is we're in a shooting part of the Third World War. The Third World War is not about to start. It has started. And that's what Trump is saying. What he wants to do is have everybody lay their guns down. Let's get to the table and figure out a tenuous, at least subtle peace that we can then use capital and trade and commerce and try to rebuild these countries, and let's get people back to work and maybe tamp this thing down. Whereas the apparatus is exacerbating the conflict part of it. That's where we are right now in the summer of 2025. And this thing is going to be in the next 200 days. The next 200 days are some of the most perilous times for the American Republic in its history. Because if we don't get this sorted, we're going to be drawn in totally into a conflict as a combatant, as not a supplier of logistics, or as an actual combatant, a participant in the situation in Ukraine, what they did in Russia, and the situation of what Israel is right now doing to the mullahs, as bad as they are and as evil as they are, right? We're going to get sucked into a shooting war of which it'll be 10 years, and the casualties will dwarf anything you saw in World War II.
Yeah, man, Bannon is on fire here. I didn't know how much I agreed with Bannon on foreign policy, but I think he's right on the mark here. I know he's been very good in opposing the proxy war in Ukraine, but this is spectacular. And again, it's significant that this is Bannon, of all people, talking about this. One of Trump's chief political advisors, his chief strategist essentially, is saying what a threat this would be not only to the country, but Trump's coalition if the U.S. gets completely sucked in. I couldn't agree with him more. I don't have as much loyalty toward Trump as he does, or Trump's administration whatsoever, but his policy recommendations are great. Get the U.S. out of there. And yeah, we don't have the same perspective toward Israel whatsoever. I'm an opponent of any Israeli aid whatsoever. I'm not very pro-Israel in that regard. I think their culture is superior, if I have to say, compared to many of the countries in the region, but that doesn't mean I want to pick their side in entangling alliances in a region that the U.S. should have nothing to do with. But either way, me and Bannon are generally on the same page here. In foreign policy, I think he's dead on, and this could be striking. And he said some things that are remarkably similar to what Dave Smith said, that this could literally be the end of the country, and you'd think that that's so hyperbolic, right? But we didn't go into Iraq with the same level of divisiveness that exists now, the same level of, race war, sex war, woke theory, and all these lines that divide us now around cultural lines. And we've experienced so many bad regime change operations that it seems like it's a scenario that could unfold. Like, we're there 10 years. If there's an occupying force, this could be worse than Iraq. They have more technology than Iraq, better weaponry, more advanced weaponry that can touch U.S. soldiers in the region. Now, they can't touch us. The fearmongers said, there's going to be a mushroom cloud over New York. It's so absurd. They don't have the delivery mechanisms for that, even if they did have a nuclear bomb, which they don't, which even Tulsi Gabbard pointed out. So to shrug off what she says and the intelligence is just madness. U.S. being thrown into this thing is a disaster. But I do want to hear from what you guys think. Is Steve Bannon right? Will this fracture MAGA's coalition and the country in general if the U.S. gets deeply involved? Or do you think there's a way for the U.S. to get out of it at this point and even maybe cling to the hope of a peace with Iran still now? Is that even possible? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and if you want to support me, please consider becoming a YouTube member or a Patreon patron. That would very much help, and I'd appreciate it. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.